Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Samsung's new 850 Pro takes SSD 3D MSI R9 280. Bargain performance GPU or overpriced mess. Silverstone's latest fanless PSU, speeding up video encodes, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 274, recorded July 3rd, 2014. 850 Pro, R9 280, and a Nightjar. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most delightful, most charming, most incredible, most amazing, and most informative news about PC hardware. We love to talk about tablets, mobile. We even talk about cell phones once in a while. You may be asking yourself, where is Mr. Ryan Shrout? And he is actually trapped under an extraordinary fireworks display in Kentucky and will not be joining us this evening. I, however, am trapped in San Francisco waiting for the world's longest traffic barge jam parking lot, which is affectionately known as the Bay Bridge to Bay Area residents, which is this weird mixture of red, dark red, and black between me and my family. So I'm going to be hanging out with the chat room doing a podcast tonight. And first of all, I just want to give a shout out to PC Per. If you did not catch the episode last week with Ryan and my man Robert Heron, they did an amazing article on, or amazing roundup on PC Per about low-cost gaming machines. It is called the Budget Gaming PC Shootout: Affordable System Builds Compared. And if you don't want to spend a lot of money and you want all the gaming performance, this one is definitely worth reading. It is amazing what you can do for the money. And when I say for the money, I mean sub $500 gaming PCs. It's awesome. It's really, really awesome. I'm excited because I was working on an inexpensive gaming PC build. And when I say inexpensive, I mean like mounting components on boards instead of buying a case, that kind of budget saving for a thing I'm doing. So it's pretty exciting. Not quite as exciting as badass $500 gaming PC performances. The SilverStone Nightjar 520-watt fanless power supply review. Lee Garbett, aka Robotech, wrote that up for PC Per, and that actually went up just last Thursday. And Ryan popped us into the list. So if you are not familiar with the idea of a fanless power supply, or PSU as I like to call them, the idea is really simple: eliminate the fan, eliminate a point of noise in your PC. So when you're talking about this, we're talking about home theater PCs, desktop PCs, super low. I mean, it's kind of funny. If you look at the advertorial thing above that picture of the power supply, fanless thermal solution, 0 dBA acoustics, right? There's nothing in there to make noise unless one of the capacitors pops and this magic smoke comes out, which is doubtful to happen. Silverstone, as Lee points out in the write-up, is one of the first companies to actually build a fanless power supply. They get the concept, and it's a pretty good concept if you have a home theater PC, not like a full-on gaming PC. The write-up's really simple. The SilverStone Nightjar SST NJ520 fanless power supply occupies a niche market and is targeted towards users who want a silent power supply for use in noise-sensitive areas such as a recording studio or science lab. Easily delivered 520 watts combined DC load with outstanding voltage regulation and excellent AC ripple suppression even at full load. And that's a big deal because a lot of inexpensive power supplies, we told you over and over again, create lots of problems inside your PC because they deliver crap power. They still require, in the case of one of the things that Robotech points out is you do need airflow in and around the power supply. By the way, a lovely set of cables come with it, as you can see on the picture right here, but you'll notice there's a lot of holes in that power supply. Keep going to the right a little bit, Burke. That's because, we're talking about convection cooling here. They need airflow in and around the power supply to carry away the waste heat. So you still need to have fans inside the case or airflow going across the fan, or at least good airflow inside the case so the convection cooling can carry away on that one. It's $149.99, which is a lot of money for a 520 watt power supply, but it is rocking the Gold PC Perspective Award. A single 12-volt output can deliver up to 43 amps, 516 watts, 4 PCI Express connectors, 6+2 pin with 1 4+4 pin, protection circuits, OCP, OVP, OPP, OTP, UVP, and SCP. 80+ platinum efficiency and capable of delivering 520 watts continuous DC output at 0 dBA. Well, let me see if I can. Is this my 0? But it's a nice part. Not the cheapest power supply out there, but the specs are awesome. Dipping into the chat room, Morpheus XP says, Patrick, I want the best $150 video card I can buy. Suggestion, 750 Ti. Done. We've got one from P&I we've been playing around with. It is an incredible part, and it is, as far as I'm concerned, it is the go-to card, available pretty cheap out there. And I'm kind of amazed, actually, at the performance of this for the money. I also had recently upgraded from a 3-year-old GPU to a 770 Ti, I think, 770. And so the whole idea of a less than a year-old GPU right now in my life is pretty amazing in terms of gaming performance. And if you're feeding a 1080p monitor, the 750 Ti has more than enough for you, unless you're looking to rock like all of the settings maxed out on a 120 hertz monitor. But yeah, they're really, really good. Next up on the list, Alan Malventano wrote this up for PCPro.com. And let me see if I can make my phone stop making scary noises. I'm rocking the Android now with the Moto G. Everybody will be happy in the chat room to know and listening at home that I did manage, with the help of my 2-year-old, to break the screen when the phone was less than a week old. Here, let me see if I can get it so you can actually see it, Burke. Gorilla Glass does shatter nicely, even on Android, and I will be replacing that probably next week. There we go. And I would like to point out that the 2-year-old helped a lot with this one, but it's the first time it hit the concrete, shattered immediately. We had the perfect corner shot. So, yeah. But now the volume is down and my phone will stop tweaking. OCZ RevoDrive 350, 480 gigabyte PCI Express SSD full review. We are seeing a lot of the PCI Express storage devices. Alan opens it up simple. OCZ's RevoDrive series has been around for quite some time. We reviewed the first of the series over 4 years ago, and they just kept coming after that initial launch. And so OCZ, purchased by Toshiba, and this is a revamp of the RevoDrive line with their new flash. Basically OCZ now has a pipeline to the good Toshiba flash because they are owned by Toshiba. It's pretty simple. The 350 specifications for max reads, the 240 gigabytes, like 1,000 megabytes per second. 40 gigabyte is with 1,800 megabytes per second. The 960 gigabyte is 1,800 megabytes per second. Max write speeds go from 950 megabytes per second on the 240 GB to 1,700 megabytes per second on the 480 and 960 gigabyte. LSI SandForce 2282 times 2 on the 240 gigabyte times 4 controllers on the 400 and 960 gigabyte versions. 19 nanometer Toshiba multi-level cell MLC flash, PCI Express Gen 2 8 lane, full height, half length in terms of it. 128-bit AES compliant encryption on board, and we're looking at 9.5 watts at idle, 14 watts active in terms of power consumption. This is a pretty freaking hot part, even on the 240 gigabyte version. And I'm going to skip to Alan's conclusion, because if you are deep into the test results are kind of interesting. If you want to get pretty deep into SSD benchmarking, Alan's the man to go. In terms of the pros on this, class-leading throughput and IOPS, good boot compatibility with the use of AHCI. Low queue depth response time and IOPS remain limited by SandForce controllers. These are the cons on this one. The lack of NMV support translates to greater CPU penalty per IO, i.e. you're using more CPU. The 240 gigabyte model is excessively costly given the specs listed at half the performance of the 480 and 960 gigabyte version, and there could be issues for Windows 7 users. So that benchmark that, yeah, and this is expensive. When we've been looking at some of these, 1 terabyte or closing in on 1 terabyte drives for like $500 on the consumer level. These are pretty pricey in terms of dollars per gigabyte, or the cost per gigabyte. It's really, really interesting. Quote, while performing some tests under Windows 7 with the currently available 2.0.0.4774 driver, we noticed some inconsistencies, namely reduced performance, but only in some benchmarks. Upon deeper investigation, we discovered that the OCZ made significant changes to the new 2.x driver in order to implement native trim support. Windows 8.1 handles this differently than Windows 7, and given many of the optimizations were likely based around Windows 8.1, some of those changes might not have been optimal for performance under Windows 7. So the benchmark, the first one you're looking at is an ATTO run under Windows 8.1, and the second one, you'll notice that between the two of those, yeah, there's that sort of falls off a lot faster as you're looking down that chart. Under Windows 7 with the same driver, you are having a significantly lower performance, which is bad when we're talking about throughput on a costly drive. The MSRPs on these are, $2 down to $221 down to $135 per gigabyte, which is a lot more expensive than we've been seeing for consumer drives these days. These are also, we should point out, MSRP. Manufacturers suggest retail prices, so we can expect hopefully a street price that is considerably lower. It's interesting stuff. 3-year warranty, rated at 50 gigabytes per day. Quote, we all kind of expected OCZ to revise the RevoDrive series with Toshiba Flash, and they did not disappoint. This was not just a drop-in swap, as OCZ made additional improvements, pushing sequential throughput to 2 gigabytes per second, sending IOPS figures higher than we've ever seen from any prior Revo series product. It's interesting stuff. Also not inexpensive if you are a consumer. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the Samsung 850 Pro 512 gigabyte full review. NAND goes 3D. Alan wrote this up for PC Per. Introduction, Samsung has certainly been pushing the envelope in the SSD field. For the past 2 years straight, they've launched class-leading storage products, frequently showing outside-the-box thinking. Their 840 Pro series was an impressive MLC performer, to say the least, but even more impressive was the 840 EVO, which basically brought in inexpensive TLC flash with super fast SLC cache. The generous SLC area present on each die, distributed amongst all flash chips within the drive, enabled the EVO to maintain pro-level performance for the majority of typical consumers' usage scenarios. The main win for the EVO is the fact that it could be produced at a much lower cost. Since its release, we've seen the EVO spearheading the push to lower cost SSDs. So what could be next? The 850 Pro. And Alan writes, if you're going, hey, they just changed the label from 840 to 850, well, think again. This SSD might have the same MEX controller as its predecessor, but Samsung has done some significant overhauling of the flash memory itself. So when you take a look at the pictures that are in the article, you have 2D flash memory where the charge is stored on the horizontal plane, and then you see the 3D flash memory. The charge's bits are not stored in the top layer. So that one that just went by is the top layer. In this case, the bits are being stored within all of those smaller, thinner layers below it. And if you go one more down, they have this amazing kind of 3D view of what's going on here. There's a really good article to talk about this 3D flash technology. But the newer type of flash, change trap flash, quote, hasn't really caught on in the 2D world, but works extremely well with the particular process Samsung has chosen. And I'm going to sort of stop before I completely butcher this, because when you get down below to figure 6 where metal gates become usable, the TCAT technology from Samsung Electronics is about the same structure as Toshiba's BICS, but a change in manufacturing makes it possible to use metal gates, which have been cited as difficult to use until now. And the tech gets really, really serious, looking at like tunnel oxide film, nitride film. It's pretty cool. So channel hole technology, since they're stacking vertically, they don't need to pack things in so tightly on the horizontal plane, which enabled Samsung to take a step back on the lithography side of things, meaning VNAND is made on a 30 nanometer process. It's pretty cool stuff. It's really, really cool stuff, because the newer 32-layer VNAND is made with a smaller die capacity, like 86 gigabit. Quote, presumably because yields are tougher the more layers you add. So, but you get more dies in a chip package, and things get really complicated from there. The benchmarks are pretty cool. When you skip to it, it is an editor's choice from PC Per. I like the increased failures where the magic smoke is leaking out of that 3D rendering that was just up there. The prices were updated. We're looking at like somewhere between 68 cents a gigabyte on the 1 terabyte version. The clock's in at $700, $130 for the 128 gigabyte version. This is the Amazon pre-order link. You cannot buy these yet. You can pre-order them though. Outstanding performance, excellent fragmentation resiliency, and a 10-year warranty. And Alan notes, yeah, I said it. Cons, hard to come up with one, but I'd really like to see this VNAND doing the TLC, SLC trick that the Evo series does. Samsung tells Alan this is absolutely doable, which likely makes this con into a pro. And the intro price of the smaller capacity units was a little on the high side. So basically, Samsung is continuing to take names and kick ass. Alan gave him a PC Perspective editor's choice. Quote, the 850 Pro delivers on one of the potential answers to ever more difficult flash memory die shrinks. Instead of shrinking, Samsung actually expanded their process back up to 30 nanometers and chose to go vertical. It's really cool. They plugged this new VNAND into their existing controller technology and really made it sing. The structure and interface improvements of the new flash go a long way to alleviate some of the small write speed issues seen on typical 2D NAND, making it very resilient to fragmentation over time, which should help out in RAID configurations lacking trim support. Did you hear that, kids? RAID with SSDs. It's about to become affordable. Kind of. Overall, he's extremely impressed with the 850 Pro. The only fault he can really find is the intro pricing is a tad high, but he's hoping that they see an 850 Evo soon. So this is really interesting. I did not remotely do justice to what's going on with the 3D construction on that. And I would highly recommend you check out PC Per's it should be either the article up on PCPer.com or PC Per's podcast, because I'm sure Alan did do justice to that. And a quick dip down into the chat room again. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? I love the moments when the chat room sweeps by so fast that you miss it as it goes by. And I think Florida Vet, there it is. The military is now watching the advances in various memory configurations designed with an eye towards radiation hardening. Do they know something we don't? Yes, they're trying to build things to survive EMPs on the battlefield, which is something that most of us don't really think about in home use. And if we do, we're probably a little more paranoid. But, and of course, I lost the other post. Oh my goodness. If you had a question in the chat room, do me a favor and repost it when you get a chance. We'll try to get to it a little later on. Little Antec ISK 150s, really small footprint. Sorry, I get excited about the chat room. MSI Radeon R9 283 gigabyte gaming review. Tahiti continues its run. Ryan wrote this up for PC Per. Says, though not really new, the AMD Radeon R9 280 GPU is a part that we haven't really spent time with at PC Perspective. It's based on the same Tahiti GPU found in the R9 280X, the HD 7970, and the HD 7950. Excuse me, the HD 7950 and others. The R9 280 fits at a price point and performance level that I think many gamers will see as enticing. MSI sent in a model for testing that includes some overclock settings and an updated cooler, allowing the GPU to run at its top speed without much noise, which is a big deal. We've been talking about that for a while, the kind of spec hardware for AMD's Radeon parts as of late. The R9s has been a little loud and a little poorly performing, and a aftermarket or a sort of an updated cooler design from the manufacturers has made a pretty big deal in terms of performance. It's a good looking card. Lots of big fans. The 280, excuse me, the R9 280X is running at 1,000 megahertz. Sorry, I'm having one of those moments. Not the 290X. Excuse me, the 280 is running at 933 megahertz, 1,792 CUDA cores. So a small disadvantage compared to the 280X and CUDA cores. 112 texture units to the 128 on the 280X, and its memory is running at 5,000 megahertz instead of 6,000 megahertz. It's a 250 watt TDP card, which means it will suck down all of your power supply, and it's selling at $229, basically the same price as the GTX 760, and about $60 less than an R9 280X. It's a good looking card. Lots and lots of thermal in that one. Ryan did the usual round of benchmarks, and he was actually really impressed with this card. We take a look at what's going on here. Quote, with the stability of the Tahiti core and the additional cooling provided by the MSI twin frozen cooler, and I mentioned it, additional cooling is a big deal on the AMD parts right now. Overclocking the Radeon R9 280 gaming card was fairly impactful. Using the MSI Afterburner software that MSI has been producing for quite a while, I was able to hit a stable core clock of 1,150 megahertz without the need to raise voltages. That is a 15% overclock from the out-of-the-box specs, and a 23% overclock from the reference R9 280 settings. That is a big jump, people. In terms of performance advantages of this overclock, you should see nearly linear scaling with GPU-bound games like Crysis 3 and Metro Last Night. That is a big, big deal. Linear scaling, that means as the clock goes up, the performance goes up, and if you're GPU-bound, it is a happy, happy change. In 3D Mark's Firestrike Extreme, the overclocking resulted in an 11% increase in the graphics score compared to the stock MSI card settings, which is essentially free performance. I like this. Power consumption was pretty healthy when you're looking at the benchmark there. You know, pretty much all these cards from the GTX 760 2 gigabytes up through that MSI Radeon R9 280 and 280X. You're looking at somewhere between 71 and 80 watts, 79.2 watts at idle, 310 to 358 watts at load, and that 358 watt score was on the 280X. Not too far behind it with 334 watts was the 280. You know, that's a pretty healthy draw. So you're going to want to have at least, probably for me, I would want at least a 700 watt power supply, 800 watt power supply. You know, it's also interesting, as Ryan points out, that R9 270X, which performance significantly trails, it's only running 47 watts more than that. So GPU is still sucking down giant amounts of power. I was actually really impressed, though, with the numbers on the sound levels, the dBA. You're looking at 33 dB at load, 31 dB at idle. That basically means running all of the wattage through that card and all of the power through that card. You are barely increasing it. And 33 dB is not a whole lot in terms of noise. That's pretty impressive, actually. It's lower than a conversation. That's lower than the background noise in a typical office. It's not 20 dBA, but you know what? You're also doing some pretty badass graphics performance with that. $239 for an R9 280 gaming. That's a pretty good deal compared to a stock R9 280X at $289. Ryan notes that it appears in the 48 hours it took me to complete writing this review, the price of the new card may have jumped as high as $270, which drastically changes my opinion of it. Keep an eye on the prices on Amazon.com and Newegg.com. And just for fun, let me go up to Amazon.com and look for that MSI R9 280. Somebody has to stop putting pop-ups on the website. Oh my goodness, that can't be right. Wow. MSI Radeon R9 280, 3 gigabytes DDR5 PCI Express, $300 up from $240. That's from at least one vendor. $296.99 on Prime. Wow. That's kind of crazy. No, actually, I take that back. It's $296 for a R9 280X, $368 for one of the only vendors selling it. Oh, as low as $280. $300 from Tiger Direct. Wow, that went up fast. So, bummer. Should the MSI Radeon R9 280 return to its original pricing of $240, fire up that gold award again. It's a great card, but watch out on the pricing. There's no point in spending $300 for the 280 if you can pick up a 280X for $289. Yeah, the gnawing on the crowbar photo is pretty appropriate on this one. Man, that sucks. You know, the other thing is wait 2 weeks and I bet the price on it goes down. Call me crazy, but that's an interesting one to watch. One last news story before we go. ARM ships Juno development platform for ARM v8 and integration. And Ryan will probably talk about this more next week. But essentially, quote, even though Apple has been shipping a 64-bit capable system on a chip since the release of the A7 part in September of 2013, the Android market has yet to see its first consumer 64-bit system on a chip release. That's about to change as we progress through the rest of 2014, and ARM is making sure that major software developers have the tools they need to be ready for the architecture shift. That help will come in the form of the Juno ARM development platform, the ADP, and a 64-bit ready software stack. So the A7 is the first core to implement ARM v8, but companies like Qualcomm, NVIDIA, and of course ARM have their own cores based on 64-bit architecture. Of course, not having software makes 64-bit kind of not useful. But it's interesting. It's interesting kind of contemplate. You know, again, there's all this infrastructure that has to be put together to make the chips perform. We know this. We talk about this, but it's always good to be reminded of this. The compute subsystem, the Juno system on a chip, is a big old diagram that kind of breaks down what's going on in terms of the Juno system on a chip. The memory system is built around 8 gigs of DDR3 running at 12.8 gigabits per second, gigabytes per second. It's extensible through the PCI Express slots and the FFPGA options, and there's a lot going on in this chip. This is going to make for some ridiculously performing mobile devices. And one last thought, quote, of course, hardware is only half the story. Today, Lenario is releasing a 64-bit port of the Android open source project, the AOSP, that'll run on Juno. That, along with the Linux kernel version 3.14 with the ARM v8a support, should give developers the tools needed to write the applications, middleware, and kernels for future hardware. Also worth noting, on June 25th at Google I/O was the announcement of developer access coming from Android L, which will support ARM v8-A as well. I cannot wait for Android L. That looks like, I mean, Project Volta, the tweaks they're doing to minimize the impact of additional applications running, that's going to increase battery life for a lot of devices running Android L. I'm excited. I want more power and less power consumption because I'm lazy that way. All right. If you are not familiar with the show, you can find more of it at twit.tv/twitch. You have all the information on subscribing to the show, making sure you get every episode of the show. You can listen to the show there. And of course, you can email the show, twitch@twit.tv, or our regular host at Ryan Shrout or at Patrick Norton on the Twitter. It's kind of funny. We had an interesting question from at Diva Mystery. Yes, the chewy crowbar of joy, and he had wrote in. Let me drop this into the rundown so Burke doesn't scream in the distance. And I'm scrolling up here, and I am cutting and pasting. Ladies and gentlemen, is there anything more exciting than listening to a man cut and paste in an audio or video environment? I think not. The weeping you hear right now is Burke in the brick house. In any case, Diva Mystery tweets at Patrick Norton, at Ryan Shrout. I just sent an email to the Twitch account asking about Xeon versus i7 for personal use. I'd appreciate your comments. And it was interesting. I asked if he was doing this in sort of a, you know, are we talking about a workstation for monster engineering apps or for, say, gaming? And he said, no gaming. I'm a computational researcher and sketch artist, Photoshop, Illustrator, and parallel programming. And I said, personally, I am all for skipping Xeon for home use unless you have scads of disposable income. And it'll be interesting to take a look. Hopefully, he's going to email us more information on the apps he's actually running. It's kind of funny. There's a thin line. That the advantage with Xeon is the additional cores, as far as I'm concerned, you can get at the high end on those. And if you actually have applications that can take advantage of that, and the money to pay for it, the Xeon starts to look really interesting. For most people, it is a lot of money for not much more performance. I'm pretty sure, though, computational research, or as he puts it, Photoshop, Illustrator, and parallel programming. Parallel programming has a lot of potential. Photoshop and Illustrator, I think Xeon is probably an overkill, unless you're like Burt Monroy working with these like gigantic 89 billion pixel canvases. I'm sure Ryan's going to laugh at me when I say that. But taking a quick look at the chat room, Patrick, how good are you with automotive colors? So 2013 or 2014 Challenger in a dark root beer, just short of black with light, almost ghosting silver strips down the side. I can't find the color at Dodge or Chrysler. You think that that was a custom paint job? Living here in the Bay Area, I would say yes. And this is not a tech question, but caffeine-free Dave shows up week in and week out, and I like to show him a little love on this one. Also, because I love talking about cars. And yeah, if you can't find it at any of the listings for the last couple, 3 years on the Dodges. I would not be surprised. There are a lot of late model cars here in the Bay Area that have been resprayed, which always blows my mind. We have a 2-year-old car that has a completely new paint job, but I also discovered there's a lot of people here in the Bay Area that buy wrecked vehicles and rebuild them. Oh, pull it up, Burke. Pull up the webpage. And I actually think that is a factory color. It's stylish and deserves to be on a PC case. PC Guy 8088 LT. Is there any reason why one would get the 840 Pro over the 840 Evo for normal uses? The Pro does have the 5-year warranty versus 3, and that would, for me, would probably be the biggest difference. You know, there's so much performance, and let me pull up Amazon.com real quick since it seems to be where I live right now. And Samsung 840. Because I do not, unfortunately, have the prices on the top of my head, but there's the Evo series. Let's start with 250 gigabytes. $130 for a 250 gigabyte drive. It is crazy. And $198 for the Pro. I mean, technically the Pro's performance should be a little bit healthier, but yeah, I mean, for consumer use, I would probably go straight with the Evo series. It's so inexpensive. Or, you know, even better yet, you know, I'm looking at the Samsung Evo, 250 gigabytes for $130, 500 gigabytes for $259. Yeah, if I was looking at $198 for a Pro versus $260 for a 512 gigabyte Evo, I would probably go with the Evo because I want more storage. Call me crazy. Look out, we're being attacked. Runs is caffeine-free Dave, and Bacon Strip points in. The P85 with the 986 doesn't compare with the 182 DSL and the PPL 128, but you can buy the Z88 and trade it in for the PP 142 and eat at Del Taco. Dude, that feels so 1986. I'm just saying. And yeah, Web 0035 850 Evo is here any day, right? Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how long that takes to ship and what the supplies are like on that. But you are able to pre-order that on Amazon.com right now. And let me pull that up. Samsung 850 Evo in all departments. $260 for the 500 gigabyte version. Man, that's going to be a great part. Yeah, I should, you know, that, you know, I would actually, I should I should absolutely thank the chat room for pointing that out. Web 0035. Yeah, if you're thinking about buying an Evo right now, you might want to wait a couple weeks or just pre-order. Yeah, let's see. August 14. That's the wrong one. 840 Pro Series. Man, I hate those moments when I can't actually find the thing I'm searching for. Yeah, keep an eye out for the new drives. Let's see. You know what? Rather than search during a live show, I'm going to stop and tell people to just read Alan's article at PC Per. Because even I know not to do too much reading of the internet while I'm recording, although it may be hard to tell sometimes. Oh, there it is. Samsung 850. I love those moments when I close the one. Yeah, it's the 850 Pro that's coming out. The 850 Pro is going to be actually a little bit more expensive compared to the, you know, in theory, the 850 Evo might be coming, but at this point, I would assume it's going to be a while for the 850 Pro. And the warranty on that is just ridiculous. There it is. Yeah, you're looking at, wow, that's actually really compelling. Man, chat room, you've just completely blew up my thoughts on this. $230 for the 850 Pro Series, 256 gigabyte SATA 3 solid state drive with a 10-year warranty. Man, that's really tempting, and it's shipping July 21st. That's going to be out in about 2 weeks. Yeah, and yeah, let me make that clear. The 850 Pro, the 850 Evo will not be out for a while. Thanks for the check on that, Keith 512. 10 years. Oh, my goodness. You know what? We're going to do one last question, or we're going to sort of talk about one last question before we go. We got an email from Andrew about using an SSD for video editing. Oh, mighty grand poobahs of computer hardware, or poobah as it may be in this case. I need your help. I'm moving from SD video to HD video. I'll be building a rig for video editing large HD video files, and I'm going to call Burke in on this one. I'm a private investigator and will be compiling video for court. As the videos cannot be edited, writes Andrew, all I'm doing is inserting a timestamp and then converting to WMV files. Typically on my current machine, a 10-minute video takes approximately 1 hour to complete, and with anywhere from 10 minutes to 1 hour of video a day, it's just way too long, especially after a 10-hour surveillance. Ouch. In a nutshell, I have questions about the configuration of my proposed system, and I'm wondering if it is overkill for relatively simple video chores. Should I use a PCI Express SSD drive, and why do I not see high-end boutique sellers doing this? Should I be using 16 gigs or 32 gigabytes of RAM, and how important is the speed of the RAM? Should I be using an i7-4790K or an i7-4930K? And lastly, how important is the GPU? I need to use an NVIDIA GPU and was wondering which one would be appropriate since the video work is relatively simple. Should I stick with a simple GeForce 750 Ti overclocked 2 gig DDR5 or a more robust GeForce GTX 770 dual superclock 4 gig 256 bit GDDR5 card? Hopefully this is not too long of an email. Long-time listener, first-time emailer. And I'm going to say, you know, I'm going to assume you're using Adobe CS6, and it's really interesting.
We are
a lot of questions.
We're moving to that.
You guys are moving to that?
Yeah, and we use GeForce cards.
Yeah,
and the PCs, they're quadros.
But you know, and it's kind of funny, right? When you go to there's a link
you can get in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably start in this situation with like 16 gigabytes of RAM. I would start with a 750 Ti. I would probably, it's kind of I don't know what system you're using now. That's always a good place to start, because, you know, if you're using a 3 or 4 year old system, simply going to like a 4930K or 4790K and 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM is going to be a huge difference.
Right. And I'd get the CPU with as many cores as you can possibly afford will help.
Yeah.
As long as you're using something that's multi-threaded.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the big question. It's like, are you using Adobe CS6? You know, and it's funny. It's funny and it's not funny because so few people I know actually render out WMV these days, right? Because most people are actually running H.264. So there's lots of information on the web about how CUDA cores are going to impact H.264, but you might be looking to maximize the use of CUDA cores to process WMV video. You might be looking at a third-party tool. Again, this is assuming you're using CS6 for this. Yeah, Intel Core i7-4790K Haswell quad core versus the 4930K. You know, assuming this is a professional expense, you know, I would be really tempted to look at that Ivy Bridge E with the 6 cores. Part of the issue is without knowing what application you're using, I don't really know how CUDA cores are going to impact WMV encoding, because I assume it's going to be faster under CS6. But like I said, I don't know anybody that's actually doing WMV encoding right now.
Is it just my imagination, or does he say, is he only adding the time code?
He's only adding the time code.
Because if he has the time, if he should add it when he's actually recording it, well, I don't know if this is about charging the client for the work.
No. The videos can't be edited. All I am doing is inserting a timestamp and then converting to WMV files, right? Because you can't actually edit the videos or do any processing to the videos, or I guess.
He's not recording the video. He's processing. He's adding time code to it.
Yeah, inserting a timestamp and converting it to WMV files. I'm assuming it's coming out. It's like H.264, and the court only accepts, or the client only accepts WMV files.
Got you. It's a courtroom stuff. They probably got it. Well, I would think they should actually already have it on the recorded video. Would be make your maybe make your life a lot easier.
I mean, I would put. I mean, it's kind of funny. A lot of the taxing stuff on this is being done in the processor and the system memory. I'm assuming most of what the bottleneck you're running into is not. I don't think going from an SSD to a PCI Express SSD is going to improve performance that much. It might be a question. I don't know if Ryan's doing any WMV encoding over there.
What saves our stuff is there's not a lot of file transferring, and it's almost real-time rendering. It's not really. Yeah. It's kind of, and that's, yeah.
I would say, certainly if it's a business expense, I would go with like 6 cores and 16 gigabytes of RAM. And it's kind of funny because you could experiment at that point, with a 750 Ti and look at the WMV rendering you're doing and do it sort of without the CUDA cores on the 750 Ti, with the CUDA cores on the 750 Ti, with 8 versus 16 gigabytes of RAM. And then do sort of a little personal experiment on that and see how it impacts it. But generally speaking, with like Adobe Creative Suite 6 and a lot of the other video editing applications, more memory is better, more cores is better, larger hard drives are better. If you can afford SSDs, that's going to launch the application better. It's going to launch different elements better and move the video around faster. I mean, for our Adobe Premiere editing systems, I think we're running like 32 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte SSDs, and all of the cores we have. But we're also doing very complex video edits here with a lot of additional effects.
Like you said, it's all processor. When you're rendering video, you're not like, it's not, you're kind of creating, generally, you're creating new frames pretty much. So.
Yeah. If you can talk to the vendor that makes the application you're using to create the WMV files, if you can ask them, what's going to impact it more CUDA cores, more CPU cores, that would be a valuable conversation for you to have before you purchase it. And let me look in the chat room real quick to make sure
I bet you it's because because they have to view the videos through Media Player or something.
Yeah, well,
something unfortunate.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, if it's always good to ask, right? Because the other thing
totally. I'm just like, wow, really? WMVs? That sucks, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. There's third-party applications that do conversion to, and my results with them have been so mixed. Some of the most professional, and when I say professional, I mean expensive, were not particularly effective for me, because in one case, like one of the most high-profile tools out there would only take advantage of a single core, and even long after dual-core machines became affordable, they still didn't want to adapt it, and they're like, "Well, we're completely CPU bound, but we don't really want to rewrite the code."
Well, and that's one of those things too. Like a lot of hardware you get nowadays has hardware encoding for H.264 and nothing has, and there's no, to my knowledge, there's no WMV hardware encoding anywhere for anything.
Well, I did see a board that did WMV encoding once, but it was several years ago. In any case, it's an interesting question. The general rule of thumb, Andrew, is more cores, more memory. SSDs are good. But in terms of, and CUDA cores are good, but you need to take a look at the software you're using and find out, make sure it will take advantage of additional CUDA cores, because there's nothing more frustrating than finding out that whatever you're doing on the application you're doing isn't exactly accelerated by the expensive piece of hardware, right? And if it turns out that more cores, more, CPU cores won't accelerate it, but more CUDA cores will, there's not a lot of, point in buying a 6-core CPU for an extra $200 when you can throw that $200 at the GPU.
Yep.
So, and in any case, if you're running a 3-year-old system that you're upgrading to just about any of the new processors you buy right now, especially if you're buying a Core i7 and 16 gigabytes RAM, should kick the snot out of that machine in terms of performance, and that alone may be enough to reduce your evenings of processing. Man, 10 hours of surveillance and then several hours of video rendering sounds particularly awful to me. So, Andrew, I hope this helps you out.
Hopefully he's getting paid by the hour, not
Yeah, I think at some point you no longer want to get paid by the hour and you just want to go home. With that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, it is July 3rd, 2014, and I hope you have a safe and sane July 4th, 2014 if you're here in the States. And if you don't have a safe and sane July 4th, do me a favor. Don't get caught. Don't burn anything down. Don't blow any parts off, and have a great time. And remember, kids, Back it up. You never know when your machine's going to die. I'm Patrick Norton. Burke was the voice you heard today. Ryan Shrout is surviving the July 4th holiday somewhere in Kentucky right now. And I want to thank each and every one of you for listening and remind you to go to twit.tv/twitch to subscribe. Tweet at Ryan Shrout, at Patrick Norton. And it sounds as if the crew of interns and PAs that have been gaming have just come to some sort of terrible, terrible final conclusion to the round of gaming. So I should probably make sure they're not slaughtering each other in the gaming room right now. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Burke. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week on Twitch.